Fresh and Buds.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all my buds, and we have a great episode for you this week. We are joined by Kale from DeadSummer Art, a great lore YouTube channel, and we're going to get into that in a bit. I wanted to hop on before we jump over to the main show and just talk a little bit about the Calling Indianapolis, which I attended this past weekend. I had the pleasure of watching the finals, which was awesome. Congratulations to Michael Hamilton for taking down 2 callings in a row, which is pretty incredible, unprecedented, obviously. And also, I wanted to give a shout out to Yang Ji Yang, a great player who plays at Highlander Games here in Jersey. Good guy that I've become friends with over the past few months, and he also took down the Battle Hardened with our boy Starvo, and we talk a little bit about Starvo in the episode today, but it's neither here nor there. But I wanted to give a little update on my performance. Obviously, not top 8 in either events. I went 3-4 with Viserai in the main event. Obviously, not making top 2, or not top 2. The day 2. I had to move this past week, so I did not get the amount of reps with the deck that I would want, but it was interesting to play the deck. It's not necessarily my style. I would say that I played the whole day. I played all 7 rounds, and then, after going 3-4, I went back to my hotel room. I was like, I just knocked everything off my desk. I'm like, I'm playing something in the Battle Hardened that I want to play. And I brewed a pretty fun Leviah deck. You know that I love Leviah. And it was playing Ravenous Meat Axe. Maybe I will be doing a video on the list itself. I did go 4-2 with that, and not good enough to make the top 8, but the losses were very close, and I feel pretty good about the deck and the list going forward. And I'll continue to tweak it and test with it. Other than that, I did play a Blitz event, a Team Blitz event with Mo Bogsley and Josh from Hometown TCG, so I wanted to give them a shout out, even though Mo seemed to really like to rub in my face that he really likes ranch dressing over blue cheese dressing. I want to give a shout out to Hollow on Twitter, who did get a playmat. He wasn't able to bring a blue cheese to the event because he flew in and he couldn't bring it on the plane, but he did order it and have it sent to my house, and I already have it, which is awesome. And I do want to give a shout out to the coverage team, Tan and Grace, Brian Gottlieb, and my good friend Matt DeMarco, aka Flake. But I want to jump into the episode now, but I just wanted to kind of cover all of that. It was a great weekend. It was great to see some friends, meet some people, and very, very excited for the game. It was a successful weekend for Flesh and Blood, and I think it only bodes well for things going forward. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the actual show with Kale from DeadSummer Art. All right, welcome back to Fresh and Buds. I am your host, Tommy Fresh, and I'm joined by a good bud of mine today, Mr. Kale, also known as DeadSummer Art on YouTube. How you doing, Kale?
I'm doing pretty good, yeah.
A little early over there in Australia right now, right?
To an extent, yeah, 10 a.m. I'm not one to really wake up before 10, so I might sound a little bit sleepy or be a little bit delusional in my topics that I talk about today, but Yeah, no, I'm doing all right.
That's all right. A little delusion is fun, especially when we're kind of going to get into a lot of lore and stuff like that today, because that's your specialty. And you know what? I think it's a very important part of the game, and I'm excited to kind of really dig a little deep into that with you today, because I'm going to be honest with you. I am not so much of an expert on lore. I appreciate the lore and I appreciate flavor. Even when it comes to the heroes that I like to play and the play style that I like to play, I kind of choose on what feels good to me flavor wise, and Levia is my favorite, and maybe it's not the best deck to play, but it is the coolest. I think she's awesome, and she has a lot of faithful servants like Mansant on YouTube is I saw him on at the calling over the weekend. He had his pink hoodie on that said Levi's faithful servant. So, which is pretty awesome, honestly. But I'm very happy to introduce you to all the buds out there, all the listeners. I'm sure a lot of you have seen Kale's stuff on YouTube under the DeadSummer art channel. But I kind of want to get a little bit of background on you and your channel. I first stumbled upon your channel when you spoiled your Tales of Aria preview card, Sutcliffe's Suede Hides, which was a great video. I was like, wow, this is like next level. I was like, okay. At that point, I had been doing the podcast for like 2 months, and I didn't have a spoiler card, and I was like super excited to see all these spoiler cards. I didn't have one for Everfest either, but hopefully the next set. But and I was like, I was looking at your video. I was like, oh my god, this is like next level. So, I've been itching to get you on the podcast. I'm glad we finally got to do it. But let's get into a little background on you. Does that sound good, Kale?
Sure. Yeah, it sounds good.
So I want to know, before Flesh and Blood, what were you doing? Were you playing any other TCGs or any kind of games in general?
I guess throughout all my life, ever since I was about 5, I've been a video gamer. I really dug into Call of Duty for many, many years. When I played that, I then ended up switching over to more PC gaming. I got really into Counter-Strike for a while, to the point where I was like wanting to try be a pro, even though that was probably, way past my skill level. And then just throughout the years in high school, I got introduced to Magic the Gathering. Played that on and off for many, many years. It was mostly Magic the Gathering, and I started to more so move into the more physical, traditional tabletop gaming side. So I started playing D&D, board games and whatnot. But Magic the Gathering was fairly big, I'd say, in terms of the things that I played. It was one of the things that took up a lot of my time. But I was starting to get a bit burnt on it, just from a lot of the things that Wizards of the Coast was doing at the time. I just didn't like the direction the game was going in, and it just so happened that around the time I was starting to get burnt, a little game we know as Flesh and Blood was announced that it was coming out soon, and I was like, hey, this looks pretty good, We actually had a little demo kit that was sent to my LGS that I work at, because I actually work at an LGS.
Oh, nice.
And I was the one that received the package, and I was like, oh, what's this? I asked my boss, did you order this? He's like, no, you can open it. So I opened it, and it had 2 IRA welcome decks and some info about the game. And I said to one of the regulars that was in the store at the time, hey, you want to try it out? So we tried it. And, he thought it was cool, but he wasn't really into it. And I was like, hey, I really vibe with this. It's got like a similar fantasy aesthetic to Dungeons and Dragons, which I'm really into. So I was keeping an eye on when the game was coming out, and I begged and begged my boss to stock it. I'm like, please stock this game. I really want to play it. And eventually he caved. He said, all right, we'll get it in, but you have to run every single event. And I've run every single event at the store since.
Wow, really? Ever since? Do you want to shout out the LGS that you work at?
Yeah, Alandriel Games in Albany, Western Australia. We're the only LGS in Albany because
Okay.
we've only got like 40,000 people here. Um, but yeah, I've run every single event. We've got a small but very tight knit community there. That's really good. And yeah, we've been playing the game since it came out, so day one.
That's awesome to hear, and there are the kind of, and I've played a little bit of D&D myself, that like that kind of aspect of, you have your armor and your equipment like out in the field, and
Mm,
you have your character where, and this is a common theme of people I talk to in the game and that people I've had on the podcast, that you know former Magic players kind of become disillusioned with that community, that game, what
yeah.
Wizards of the Coast was doing. We can harp on that all day, but it is what it is, right? Um,
Yeah.
but Magic also had a very deep lore, and it's also the same
Mm,
company that makes, you know, Dungeons and Dragons. At least to a certain extent. Obviously people can
mm.
kind of expand on that however they want, but um, did you get into the lore in Magic like you did with Flesh and Blood, or was there something a little bit different about Flesh and Blood that kind of led you to this kind of really cool YouTube channel?
Um, I did kind of get a little bit into the magic lore. Um, it's a weird one. So because magic's been around for so many years, there's like a ton of lore for it,
Hmm.
but it's kind of scattered a lot. Um, I I've always kind of harkened back to the fact that planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering became sort of the focal point for the story, that I actually kind of didn't like it.
Hmm.
I I feel like I'm not sure if you've played Magic before. Have you played Magic much
Yeah,
or?
yeah. I was a big Magic player, probably for like 12 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yep. So
yeah,
you know all about planeswalkers.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah. So because you know Magic for all of its sets it wants to jump between planes of existence. I feel like because planeswalkers are kind of the only thing that tie the planes together, that like the story on each plane almost feels like it's just one and done and it doesn't really have any lasting effect. Like there are some elements that I've seen where they'll connect things from Kaladesh to Ravnica and Ixalan, and there's this whole War of the Spark thing, and
Yeah.
that makes sense, but I feel like it's just kind of there's no lasting sort of effects that I can see on each plane that they seem to go back to often. I don't like the idea from a lore perspective of them just doing one set per plane of existence and then moving on. I actually preferred it when they did blocks where it was,
Hmm.
they had an introduction to the plane. The middle set was kind of the rising of a conflict, and then the third set was the resolution. I thought that was really cool. You got to spend like a good 6 to 9 months of a year invested in the story of a certain plane, and now it's just like, oh yep, 2 months later it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
um
That's interesting that you say that. And just to interject there, I think, and you mentioned War of the Spark, and we don't have to talk about Magic a lot, but like that was like one of the weirdest turning points for me as a
mm,
Magic player at the time, in terms of my investment into any kind of the stories. Right? Was they were like, it felt like to me they were like, we need our own Avengers Endgame or something like that.
yep, yep.
I was like, oh, okay. And it also ended up being like one of the worst sets ever, and like whatever. You could talk about that on the Magic podcast, and probably for like 10 hours. But
Yeah,
you
don't
know,
talk about the books that came out for War of the Spark. We don't talk about that.
oh yeah, and that's how far out of it I am. I never really read any of the literature that came with Magic, but uh, as it is interesting that you bring that stuff up, that the blocks kind of sets that we saw were actually just a lot more just made more sense as a story. And
Mm.
you know, I will say, like, you know, I do have qualms with supplemental sets in Flesh and Blood not being draftable, and that's like pretty much it. I think other than that, they're really great because I love to draft, right? But you know,
Yep.
it was kind of cool to get the Tales of Aria, and then like, oh, let's dive deep into Everfest. So, yeah, sorry, this
Yeah.
is like kind of a long-winded thing, but so you're obviously a little bit more into the lore of Flesh and Blood than you were with Magic.
Yeah, just I guess just a little bit more, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really got into it. I think the reason why was because it was so similar, I guess, in aesthetic to Dungeons and Dragons and just
Hmm.
campaigns I've run. Um, and it just feels more relatable, or like I just care about it more because they've taken time to establish these regions and really give them their own unique identity that, and in a similar way to why in Magic the Gathering the guilds of Ravnica were so popular, or
Hmm.
the clans of Tarkia were popular, is because they gave gameplay mechanics their own sort of feel and aesthetic, so people could really be like, yes, you know, Solana is the region I love the most, or like the Savage Lands, I really love the Savage Lands, and it just, you get more of a devotion to it, I guess. It I'm trying to figure out the words to explain it. It's the reason why in this game and any games, like video games especially, that have characters instead of classes that you just play and make your own character for, like League of Legends, Apex Legends,
Hmm.
Overwatch, Rainbow Six Siege. They have characters, so it's not just whatever you make it. It's predefined stuff that people can really connect with, and you know, you'll have people go, you know, man sent, you know,
Hmm.
Leviah is his main. So, and then you get these diehard fans, and they really dive into it, and it's, yeah, it's just, it's almost the vessel for their passion, that they can just like focus on certain aspects of the lore and really connect that to their personality, that I think gives the Flesh and Blood lore more prominence over Magic the Gathering, where I guess the closest thing in Magic the Gathering would be the Planeswalkers, but there's so many of them, and so many of them just aren't fleshed out, and you know,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that's the reason why I got more into Flesh and Blood lore, is because it's more easy to connect with. So
Yeah, and it does feel like, at least, you know, obviously from a lore perspective, but also a gameplay perspective, that it
mm,
each hero really feels like they're doing a thing that is so specific to them. I can't think of, maybe outside of like Ira and Katsu, which is, you know, it's whatever. You know, they're both ninjas from like the beginning of the game. I can't think of two heroes that are kind of doing the same exact thing. Like you look at like Dorinthia, right? Dorinthia is doing, you know, just swinging with the Dawn Blade, and you know,
mm,
kind of trying to hit twice and stuff like that. But and then you look at the next warrior they printed, Bolton. Bolton's like got a whole new identity, you know,
yeah,
which is so cool. And if like you do not feel like you're playing the same warrior deck when you pick that up, as opposed to like, you know, Magic, where like, you know, your maybe your mono blue like planeswalker, your Jace is always going to have some kind of Jace, like, you know, Jace kind of thing going on, and then the next blue one is like probably
mm.
going to be a little bit similar to Jace in a way.
Yeah.
But
There's not really any disparity between, I'm not even sure if that's the right word, disparity between like a mono blue deck from one set to another. It's like kind of all the same,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just slightly different.
Yeah, yeah. So which is a really cool thing, and I think it's a real reason why Flesh and Blood is seeing a lot of success, and you know, kind of gets us excited for things like this classic battles set that we're
Yes.
getting in the end of May with Dorinthia and Rhinar. We're gonna, like, it's even exciting that we're gonna get just a couple new cards out of it, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I'm excited to get it because it's going to have a little bit of lore in there. They're going to have like a little booklet, right?
Yes, I am super excited for that. I've already pre-ordered my own copy, so
Oh yeah,
I'm very keen to see what it actually is. I almost feel like it's going to be a short story booklet, but
that'd be
you know,
kind of neat. That'd be kind of neat. Kind of just like explain what's going on between these two heroes, these two characters that came from the beginning of the game, and that's even like a cool thing that you don't see in a lot of games where um, I feel like sometimes games will kind of step away from their origin and then like years down the line they'll kind of return to it and then at that point it only feels like the old heads can only really enjoy it um,
yeah, yeah.
where I feel like LSS is kind of keeping their own origin in mind moving forward, which I think is pretty cool. So you got into Flesh and Blood. You were working at
Mhm.
this LGS. How often do you get to play?
Um, I get opportunities to play at least once a week. So we have like a an open play night that we have. So like every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, we'll just have space available where anyone who wants to come in and play can play whatever decks they want. You know, blitz constructed, pit fight. Um, that's always a once a week thing that I always try and attend. And then every second Sunday, we normally have some sort of tournament
Hmm.
or like actual event. That will be like an armory event. So I always play at those. I've only missed one over the past 2 odd years. I've only missed one event.
That's not too bad.
So I get to play at least once a week. Depending on how I'm feeling, if I'm really craving it, sometimes I'll jump on Tabletop Simulator. I have some friends that I can play with online. Um, but yeah, I don't get to play it as much as, tournament grinders and stuff where I see them playing a couple games every single day. But
Hmm.
yeah, I get to play it fairly often, I'd say. So
Yeah. Well, I mean that's enough to kind of call yourself a flesh and blood player.
mm,
There's all different kinds of levels of players, and like during this like pretty intense competitive season, it can be hard to see that. I think for a lot of the
mm,
casual players out there, because we go on Twitter and we go on social media and stuff like that. We see people at callings and pro quests and stuff like that. They're just grinding,
yeah.
grinding, grinding, and which is great. I actually think that's a very integral part of the success of the game, and I think is awesome. I love participating in that, but I also love the casual side of it as well, and to be able to just kind of play when you want to, which is pretty important. So that's a good level to be at as well, because some of us have busy lives. I wish I could
Yes.
I wish I could play more like the grinders, but sometimes you gotta like move apartments last minute and stuff like that. So it is what it is. So do you,
Hmm.
do you want or not do you want, do you have a favorite hero in the game from a gameplay perspective? And then I want you to tell me, do you have a favorite hero in the game from a lore perspective?
Yes, I certainly do. Anyone who knows me semi decently knows that I absolutely love Viceroy, both from gameplay and lore. Viceroy is my main that I play. I've been playing him ever since he came out. A little bit of that is to do with some spoiler cards I've been given, but
Hmm. Yeah.
um, yeah, I've as a Magic player in the past, I always loved combo decks where you could just make some sort of janky combo, and I really loved trying to go against the grain of the meta. I always felt like net decking and stuff was kind of just boring. Like if you want to be competitive, I understand it, but I think half the fun of a trading card game is trading the cards and building your own deck.
Hmm.
So I always loved making janky combos, and I think that fed really well into Viceroy just because he's more of a tempo orientated hero where you really have to pace your turns out and kind of forward plan a little bit. You might draw a hand that's all non attacks. Um, so you have nothing for your non-attacks to feed into like attack actions. So you have to kind of plan it out, and you have to play this delicate. Bleh. Stumbled over my words there. This delicate dance is what I was trying to say. Between playing your non-attack actions and your attack actions, and trying to get the most out of both, and knowing when to switch it up. I think that's just such an interesting play style for the game. Instead of just going, oh, I've got a handful of attacks, I'll just play them out in the most efficient order. And then from lore, I just think he's such an interesting character. Someone who we don't know much about their origins. They just washed up on the shore of the Demonastery. They were some sort of warrior from Volcor, it's assumed. And then this man starts doing experiments on him, and he's now re-alive. He's come back to life, but he's not the same. But there's still fragments of his past mind there that he can start to fight back against his master, and kind of carve his own place in the world. Like he's a lost soul. He's a wayward soul, which I can kind of relate to a little bit in my own personal life, not knowing where I belong, and trying to find my own sort of niche. I feel like Viserai is a bit like that, especially now that he's kind of not under the thumb of Sutcliffe anymore, and he's kind of free to do his own thing. I'm very interested to see where that goes. Is he going to travel back to Volcor? Is he going to continue to help Chain in the Demonastery? It can go anywhere. He's morality is very grey around Viserai, and I like it when things are grey, where you can really feel sympathy for someone who has done horrible things. I mean, Viserai has brutally murdered multiple people, but were those people deserving of being murdered? Maybe. Is he a hero or is he a villain? He's kind of an anti-hero, which is, that's why characters like the Joker or Harley Quinn in superhero movies are popular, because you can see hints of humanity and good in them, but they don't necessarily tap into it all the time. So
yeah. I actually, the Viserai kind of fandom and kind of like I believe the Viserai fans are very great and in number and in personality. For a long time, ever since even in the days of Viserai not being the powerhouse competitively that it is right now. It's not quite stomping on the Starvos and the Prisms of the world, but it's still up there in the big three, as I mentioned last week with Pat, who was on the show. But it's nice to see as a Leviah player, and I can also relate this to the Azalea players out there. It is nice to see one of the low tier decks finally get their time in the sun, and it is exciting. I'm excited for the Viserai fans out there, and I mentioned it at the top of the show in the little intro before we got into the interview that I did play Viserai for the first time this past weekend. I will say not necessarily my how can I say this?
I know you've got strong words for Viserai.
not even. It's like it's just not. It's not the way I like to play. I think which is fine. I think that's the beauty of this game is like literally every hero has their own play style, which is so cool, and a lot of that comes from the top down too, which is really really neat. But have you read the lore book, Kale?
I have. I actually have my own copy, which I'm very fortunate of. Initially, because the LGS I work at was one of the first. What was the phrase that they used? It was like early supporters, I think was the phrase. Of Flesh and Blood. We got sent a retailer appreciation kit, which does come with a lore book. So we had one at the store. So when I was starting to get into the lore and look into it, you know, possibly making videos for YouTube at the time, you know, I was able to read it all. And then when I started actually making videos, I had James White reach out to me and he goes, "Do you have a lore book?" And I was like, I'm kind of borrowing one at the moment from the store." And he goes, "I'll send you your own copy." So,
Oh, that's awesome.
I do have my own copy, which is amazing. It's such a nice collector's piece, especially since now that the game's gotten so big, you start to realize how rare some of the stuff you've gotten in the early days is.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I definitely do have a lore book, and I have definitely read it back to front multiple times.
Oh, that's so cool. Now, was the lore book, like reading it, so you mentioned that's when you started making videos. Was that the driving force in kind of inspiring you to make, I mean, your lore videos, which are very excellent, by the way?
Thank you. Make my head big.
Well, I'm only saying that because I think I'm going to be in one soon, right?
Yes.
Maybe.
I don't think I've actually announced that yet. It's been a while coming, just due to life and stuff getting in the way. But it is in the works. Tommy will be in a lore video with some amazing voice acting work, which is, once it's put to music, it's just, it gives me chills, man. It's like a movie trailer.
I'm so excited to see the finished product because, you know, I when I sent you the audio file, and this is some inside baseball for the listeners, but I sent you the audio file. I'm just listening to myself do some kind of accent, and I'm like, oh man, I hope this turns out okay. But I have complete faith in you, my friend, to make it into a really excellent video, which all your videos are. So, but yeah, so you can. That was the driving force, the lore book.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to do some sort of creative endeavor, whether it was art, whether it was video making. I've even considered music, even though I'm probably not the best at music. And I'd always been looking for some topic in particular to dive into, because I didn't want to start a YouTube channel with no direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to know your target audience, your target demographic, and to also make content that you yourself would enjoy. And I've always loved YouTube channels that are like dedicated to a particular topic and less sort of all-rounders. Like, there's nothing wrong with all-rounders, and I do enjoy many all-rounders, but I think I really love getting stuck into the back catalog, especially of like, I'll find a new YouTube content creator that's making, you know, some content that I really enjoy, and they're very dedicated to the topic, and I'll just start binge watching all of their stuff. So when I saw the lore book, I knew that lore for Flesh and Blood was going to be a big thing, and this was essentially it was almost like a free script for a bunch of videos to an extent. I try not to just parrot whatever LSS puts out. I think it's important to put your own sort of spin on it and tell the tale in your own words. But it was essentially like an encyclopedia of the majority of like the outlining and foundational lore for the game. And I was like, this is the perfect resource for my channel that I, you know, was thinking of making. And I'm like, I could totally make videos using the lore book as my reference, and start to come up with, you know, narrations of stuff that's in the lore book, and also coming up with my own theories, because I think theories are just as important as actually discussing what's released, because that helps, you know, build hype and discussion around the game. So yeah, I'd definitely say that was a big catalyst. Now that you've said that to me, I haven't really thought about it, but that was probably a big catalyst for why I actually started creating the content, just because I had such a good resource to turn to. So
yeah. I mean, I can imagine, you know, sitting there, you know, working at that LGS, kind of, you know, playing the game a little bit, getting that lore book, and looking through it, which the lore, you know, I think everybody talks up the lore in Flesh and Blood. I don't think I've ever heard a negative thing about the lore in Flesh and Blood. We've heard negative things about balance and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
this is not that podcast. The lore has been so consistent, and I think they've won on a top down design level. Relating back to the lore, pretty consistently, at least since I've been playing the games almost a year ago now. But now, what is your creative process when you decide to sit down and make these videos? So you've received a couple preview cards. So both the suede Sutcliffe suede hides for Tales of Ario and Revel in Runeblood for Everfest. Did you have any before then?
Yes, my first spoiler card was for Arcane Rising. I actually spoiled Nebula Blade, which was really cool. So, yeah, I had been reached out to. It was actually after my very first video, which was just a general overview of the World of Wraith. Ian Kenderdine from, he was working for LSS at the time as the community manager. He had seen my video and he reached out and he's like, "Hey, do you want to partner with LSS?" And I was like, "Yes." After one video, yes, of course. And he's like, "Yeah, we'll send you a spoiler card. We'll give you a bunch of lore for it too." And I was like, "No way, this is nuts!" Like,
That's so cool.
It was the first time anything like that happened. So, I got Nebula Blade as my first one with a bunch of lore. And then the second card after that was Sutcliffe's research notes, which also had a ton of lore to it. And then my third card was the Lord Sutcliffe Mentor, which had a bunch of lore to it.
Seeing some
which was crazy
theme here.
Yeah. And then, Sutcliffe Suede Hides and then Revel in Runeblood. So they were the cards I had been given for spoiler seasons. LSS has specifically said to me in emails they consider me the Sutcliffe guy. So they send me all the cards with Sutcliffe lore in it. So
Oh, I love to hear that. That's also very comforting, even as just a player, to hear the LSS kind of just like recognizing that. It's like,
yeah,
it feels so human, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but it feels like a company can be very humanized when they're like, looking at their creators and be like, oh, this is, recognizing that you're a Runeblade fanatic and a Sutcliffe, their Sutcliffe guy, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do have a question, since you did spoil Nebula Blade.
Yes.
How much do you hate Rosetta Thorn? Because I remember playing Nebula Blade before Rosetta Thorn was out, because it was the best option at the time.
So I both love and hate it. So I love it because it's such a good weapon. I love the theme behind it. I love the sort of aesthetic of it, very nature-based Runeblade, which was so different to any other Runeblade we had before. Because normal Runeblade of Viserai and Shadow Runeblade, very similar in terms of theme. But just Elemental Runeblade was just something different. It was quite spicy, which I quite liked. The reason I hate it is because it's not an Elemental Runeblade weapon. What were they thinking? What the hell were they thinking?
I do not know.
Why would you give that to me as a Viserai player? Thank you, but you've just given me a loaded gun, and you're like, just leaving a gun on the table, and you're like, I know there's people you don't like. Here's a gun. And it's
my God.
why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Now I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it and I'm just going to wreck face. So I only use Rosetta Thorn in my deck at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's the best option, and it did seem a little ridiculous, and we'll get. I have a question for you later in the podcast about some lore misses in design, and obviously that one might be making the list for both of us. But now I got to ask you, are there some heroes from lore or flavor text and cards that you hope to see in future sets? Like any in particular?
There was mention of a. It was on the card Lightning Press. There's mention of a Crimson Haze Rebel. I forgot what her name was, but the reason that she appears in the flavor text of a lightning card
Mm-hmm.
makes me very excited for the prospect of a potential lightning ninja,
Mm-hmm.
which would be sick.
So
Because
sick.
lightning press is obviously a callback to lunging press,
Yep.
which has, even though that's a generic card, it's been kind of a ninja thing. Um, whatever her name was, I'm interested to see her. Um, who else? I know there's a few. I'm interested to see who the illusionist is on cards like Spears of Surreality
Mm-hmm.
and
Shimmers of silver.
Fractal. Yeah, Shimmers of Silver. That's a different character, but I'd love to see
Oh yeah.
her. Fractal Replication. Um, that character. She's like a darker skinned woman with like white hair.
Oh yes,
Uh,
yes.
I love seeing repeats of certain characters in both the flavor text and the card art, because that's actually how we figured out Volda Britax was the thing, because she was on a couple cards in Welcome to Wraith, and I was like, she's probably going to be a guardian in a future set, and I was right about that. So I
Yeah,
definitely think they drop hints to a lot of things like that. So I love looking
definitely.
at all the flavor text and the artwork and being like, I'd love to see that character as a hero, you know.
I think Valda kind of really confirmed all that, which is really cool because now you know that we're gonna get the guy on Mangle, or and Pulverize, the guy with those big horns and stuff like that in a Guardian form. Hopefully not too soon. I don't think we need a new Guardian anytime soon.
Yeah, not
But
for a bit.
when eventually that happens, you know that's going to be one of the most badass heroes in the game.
Yeah.
I personally am really interested in so in the card Spill Blood, um,
Mm.
which is the from Monarch, the one costed red warrior action with 3 defense. Axes you control gain +2 and dominate until on a turn go again. So that is the reason to play like Dory axes and even Bolton axes to
Mm.
a certain extent. But you get this depiction of like this really just absolutely insanely huge axe on this
Yeah,
guy's
it's massive.
shoulder with almost like a Spartan helmet, and the flavor text is I expected you to live longer, and the name is Danu Ashengard. I wonder, do you think that could possibly be the name of a future warrior that's going to wield some big old insane axe going
Um,
forward?
yeah, I definitely think so. I I think just based on the artwork and the name Ashengard, it really speaks
Mm-hmm.
Volcor.
Oh yeah,
Which makes me think that if they're going to be from anywhere, it'd be from Volcor.
that's exciting.
Um, so that could be a possibility, because I do also know that you want to talk about potential upcoming sets, and a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people have been thinking about Volcor as a potential. Um, but yeah, the name Ashengard just screams Volcor, you know, volcano, ash, fire. It just makes sense, you know, and guard, uh, you know, that really references the fighting forces of Volcor, you know, the armies and whatnot. So, and I mean, also, I think in the card Shatter, which we got
Yep,
from Everfest, I think that shows an axe slamming into a shield.
it sure does.
Um, so
I did a whole
yeah.
video on that card because it says target two-handed weapon, which we don't have a two-handed
Mm,
axe outside of Ravenous Meat Axe, which you can't play Shatter with. Um,
yeah.
so we're definitely getting some kind of two-handed axe in the future.
Mm,
Very excited about that, but I'm
that'd
glad
be
you did
sick.
bring that up, and I'm glad you did bring up Volcor because there is heavy speculation that the next booster set will take place on Volcor. What can you tell us about Volcor?
So Volcor is very interesting because there's a lot of political dynamics at play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for those that don't know, Volcor is pretty much a monarchy, which is one of the reasons why when we got teasers for Monarch, a lot of people thought Volcor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably more like a dynasty. I don't know the difference between a dynasty and a monarchy. They're very similar. But basically they have a emperor and an empress. Um, and they have a royal bloodline that they believe is connected to an ancient. It's pretty much implied that it's a dragon that sleeps under Mount Volcor, which is where the royal palace sits. And they believe that is what created the rivers of lava in Volcor and created the volcano itself. So there's a lot of like royalty, royal bloodline type stuff, and the royal bloodline seems to give whoever is born into it the abilities to like control fire and have access to fire magic, which I'm still trying to figure out how that's connected to something called Aether Affinity, which is talked about a lot in Sutcliffe's background and backstory. Which Aether Affinity is something that people need in order to cast magic. And it's kind of connected to the royal bloodline, but their form of magic seems to be slightly different than the normal Aether magic. I'm still trying to figure that out. I think we need a few more bits of the puzzle before I can really sort of confirm any of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a royal bloodline. There's a bunch of wizards as part of their court. So obviously, if we go to Volcor, we could see another wizard. I mean, we've got Kano from Volcor, so that makes sense.
Okay, so
But
that
there's
was my
also-
next question. Like, Kano
Yeah.
is related and from Volcor.
Yeah, so Kano's from Volcor. He's a bit of a special individual because he seems to have found some. It's actually not said where, I think, but in his backstory, it's actually talked about how he found some. I think it was some ancient scrolls that had archaic incantations on them that allowed him to manipulate Aether more effectively. Because there's something called, I think, the Trial of Embers is what it's called, which is if you want to sort of rise up through the ranks of being a wizard in the courts, you have to go through the Trial of Embers, where you'll be given challenges. Where the one that is described in his backstory is there's a basin that's in front of each of the students that's full of lava, and they have to use their innate fire magic to try control and shape the lava and pull it from the basin and like make it swirl around. And many of the students just straight up failed, but because Kano had access to this incantation, it gave him much easier control over the lava, and he's able to like flourish it around and whatnot. So yeah, he has some sort of extra knowledge behind him, which makes him an interest to the Lord Wizards in Volcor, who actually bring him in and be like, okay, how did you do that? Like, come on, you know, did you have something extra that you were doing, or are you actually this good? And that's when he kind of spills the beans. But yeah, so Kano's a big part of that. He's been given the title of Drakai of Aether by the Emperor himself. Not that the Emperor specifically talked to him. He used another relative of his family to talk to Kano, because, you know, Emperor ain't got time to talk to you. And yeah, basically the Emperor's tasked him with figuring out what's going on with the Aetheric disturbance that's happening at the moment, because something's going wrong with Aether. Aether's kind of like a baseline energy that kind of permeates throughout all of Wraith. And there's something going on. There's some weird shenanigans going on. Aether's not feeling right. Magic's not acting how it's normally meant to act. So, you know, there's some interesting storyline behind Kano that could definitely be developed in another set. But another interesting part of Volcor is the sort of the lower echelon of the society, where the working class is kind of forced to be slaves under the generals that control massive armies. But there's also interesting dynamic in that there are multiple generals all fighting for control over Volcor and its people and the forces that it has. So there's a lot of backstabbing and you know, diplomacy and political intrigue, which I think would be really cool to sort of focus on as part of a storyline if we do go to Volcor. I think an assassin from Volcor would be very interesting. One that's sent out to kill some of the generals by another general.
That would be
Because
very cool.
we have had in the lore book, assassin is listed as one of the professions in Wraith, so a lot of people think that will be a class. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting ways they can go about developing a story if we were to go to Volcor. You'd have the working class, you'd have the generals and the soldiers within Volcor, you'd have the royal court and their diplomacy, because there's a lot of backstabbing in that as well. So yeah, Volcor is very interesting. It's very focused on, sort of the storylines that you'd see in like both eastern regions and eastern history, where there was a lot of backstabbing and royal bloodline tie-ins, and the emperor has a son, and then all of a sudden all of the emperor's consorts are consorts and servants and assistants are trying to like kill the son so they can get in line for the throne, and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. Volcor.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see what they do.
That seems like like, first of all, quite the mess on Volcor, to be honest.
Yeah,
in terms
it
of
ain't a good place to live.
yeah, but probably will make for an amazing booster set. Do you well, okay, I have two questions. Do you think Volcor is our next destination? And if it is, what we're seeing talents a lot more often with Tales of Aria and Monarch. Do you think we'd get new talents? Do you think we'd get some of the old talents, or no talents at all?
I think it's inevitable. I think the way that LSS has planned out the sets is very deliberate. The first two sets was basically showing us the regions of Wraith. And then Crucible, that's a supplemental set, so that just added onto it. And then once they hit Monarch, they're like, okay, we're going through every single region and we're fleshing it out.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to get another general set per se. I think if we do, that's what the supplemental sets would focus on.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that we're going to, in upcoming sets, have the focus of the set be on one specific region, or maybe two at the same time. And I think that they're going to have talents in every single set until they finish going around all of Wraith.
Like new talents, you think?
Yeah, new talents. They might go back, but I think the only time they would go back is if they have a supplemental set, like Everfest. But they actually didn't have any talent stuff in Everfest, which was quite interesting.
It was. It was.
So we got no support for like light or shadow. We didn't even get elemental.
Yeah, not really. I mean,
we kind of did with like Starvo
and Iceland,
but that doesn't really count.
Yeah.
There's no actual class cards to play with, but I think Volcor is definitely up there on my list of places to go. I think the two most likely places that we're going next is Volcor and Mysteria. I think a lot of the flavor text and the artwork on cards that we've already seen points towards that. For example, Seek Horizon, which came out in Monarch.
Right?
Yeah, that depicts Mysteria, and the flavor text points towards the fact that Mysteria knows something is coming. So it kind of hints at the possibility that Mysteria could be the next set. I initially thought before Tales of Aria came out that it was going to be between Aria and Mysteria. So I think at this point, it's pretty likely that we'll get Mysteria. So I'm thinking maybe they'll do a two region focus for this next set.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think it will be Volcor and Mysteria, which would be an interesting dynamic. In terms of the talents, I've been trying to rack my brain as to what the talents for each region could be. I don't think they're going to go and add extra elements to the elemental talent.
Like no fire or anything like that.
I think I think if we do get fire, you're not going to be able to play it with elemental.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because elemental is strictly Arya's thing.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't make sense if you had fire become an element that could be added onto that, but it wasn't a part of Arya.
Okay.
So I think from Volcor, if we do get a talent, it could be fire. But I think what's more likely is draconic. So
Interesting.
I think they're going to focus more on the draconic bloodline. So instead of having a like a fire warrior, they might have a draconic warrior, and it might obviously have some tie into, fire-based attacks or some sort of burn. Maybe there'll be a burn token instead of a frostbite token where you take
Oh,
extra damage or something,
that would
which
be
would
really
be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I think draconic is probably the closest that I could think of, or maybe Drakai is what they would call it.
Yeah.
I think that's my guess for a talent for Volcor. And then for Mysteria, God knows, Wind maybe. But I also thought maybe like Oracle or like Seer or something to do with maybe fortune telling to an extent. There's a lot of like if you look at the card, Nourishing Emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's very Mysterian in aesthetic, and it shows a storyteller or like someone who can kind of glimpse the future, is kind of the overall theme I get from that card, because in the background you see depictions of the other heroes, being killed and stuff. So I think there'll be some sort of like opt mechanic for the talent for Mysteria. Maybe you can look at the top couple cards and like opt a bunch, or I don't know, something like that
Yeah.
for Mysteria if we get that. So that's my guess. I'll lock that in for
All
the
right.
next set.
Well, you
Alrighty.
you heard it here first, folks.
You heard it here first. I'm going to be completely wrong.
Well, you know what? You never know. Capolo was spot on stalagmite.
That was crazy.
That was
Oh my
pretty
god.
crazy, right? So
Yeah.
hey, Kale from DeadSummer Art just laying down some bold predictions. Now, it's pretty clear that LSS takes like a top-down design approach in their game design, which I personally really like. Do you believe they've been successful in doing so? And do you believe they've missed on any cards, sets, like Rosetta Thorn in a way?
Rosetta Thorn, yep. I I'm sure there was reasons why they didn't make Rosetta Thorn elemental. But, obviously them allowing non-elemental Runeblades to use it, bit of a flavor fail to an extent, and, mechanically it was probably for the best if they didn't allow that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they've taken the right approach to building the lore of Flesh and Blood. They've made a very solid foundation. Oh, there goes my phone. I should probably put that on silent. 1 second. Yeah, they've made a solid foundation, and really built up each of the regions to be special on their own and to be unique. I think that was the best way to go about it. Just so they just dropped hints really to a lot of the lore that could exist, which is good, because if you just spell out everything that's in the lore, it makes it very boring. There's no room for speculation or guessing or hype as to like, oh, I wonder what's, further into the pits. I really want to explore the pits. We don't know too much about it. Or, Mysteria, what's going on with all that, and Volcor. So I think they've done it very well, very smart. They've told us just enough to get interested, and then left the rest for future sets. Which, if they just spell it out, they're like, oh yeah, this is what's in the pits. This is everything. It's like, oh, I don't care if we go to the pits because we already know everything about it. So I think the top-down design approach was very good. In terms of things that they've missed, I don't know. it's very hard to think what's kind of a flavor fail. I do think they missed out. This is just a random thing that I've talked about with other people. The card from Everfest, Wax On, which is a defense reaction.
Yeah.
They needed an attack reaction called Wax Off.
I agree, man. I've been saying that every episode. Oh my god, like, dude.
Where's Wax Off? I need Wax Off.
That's coming in Mysteria. I'm telling you, it has to.
Probably.
Yeah, it had. But it felt like a really big opportunity they missed there. But yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't think they've missed on anything, and if they have, it's been so minor that I can't think of it off the top of my head. Yeah, they've just done such an amazing job hiring good writers, which is very understated in a company. Companies will just look at pure profit margins, as to whether or not the game's succeeding. They don't often look at the long-term success of it, which, Wizards of the Coast, I think they fired like a whole department of their writing team around about War of the Spark, probably.
It
Which
checks out.
yeah, it definitely checks out. So I think that's just such a bad idea, because while having good lore doesn't necessarily sell the game to new players, it keeps players around. It keeps them invested. It keeps them hyped for new sets. It gets them making fan art and fan fiction and cosplays. We're getting a lot more cosplays nowadays, which they will post it on their social medias, and people are like, yo, that's a cool cosplay. What's that from? I want to try out that game that is from. It keeps players around for the long term, which means more sales. But it's a long term investment to create good lore for your card game.
It really is.
And I think they've invested more than enough in good lore, and I hope they continue to keep the quality of writing at a high quality, because it's definitely working. I mean, I've dedicated my entire channel around it, so it's got to be, somewhat decent. So
yeah, I mean, it's I agree 100% that you have to kind of have that long-term vision, especially when it comes to something like lore, because you could easily. They could have easily said, like, just reference Volcor and been like, you know what, we'll get there eventually or something like that. But like, it's very clear that they had a plan with everything so far.
Yeah.
And obviously there have been some misses on design from a card game perspective, for sure. Yep. As we saw with Briar making X amount of embodiments and Duskblade and Starvo, Seas of Agony. But those are growing pains. That's like hard when you have a small team. Like you have to understand
it's
that.
Inevitable.
Yeah, it's like you can't test everything like thousands of people are testing. It is what it is. But no, you bring up some excellent points. But now, which hero do you want to win the Pro Tour in my home state of New Jersey in May?
I gotta say Viceroy, obviously, but I want an underdog to win. I just want a hero just to, as I said earlier, I love going against the grain of the meta. I just want someone to play something just so out of left field, and just because people aren't preparing for it, just take the top tables by storm and just come through. Maybe Azalea? I don't know. I don't think Azalea could do it, but, sorry, Azalea fans.
Yeah, I mean, Lexi probably a little more likely. I will say that.
Lexi's making some waves. Lexi's making some waves. So,
I'm in the same boat as you. Everybody loves an underdog, right? But if Starvo winning means living legend, I think it's fine. It's fine to root for Starvo, because let's just get him out of here. That's all. At this point, I'm just like, because I was an indie and he won the Battle Hardened and the Calling, so I was like, okay, just get all the points now, just do it. But but other than that,
I'd like to give my opinion on Starvo, actually. So
yeah, go for it.
I've only got experience playing against Starvo once, because my local meta doesn't really play Starvo.
That must be nice.
And yeah, we don't play meta decks really. Like, there's one person that he's a younger kid and he kind of net decks, but like he doesn't play the top heroes. Like, he's playing a Dorinthia Axe build at the moment, which is brutal.
Awesome.
It's actually so good. I was just like, oh my god, this is a nightmare. But like, you know, he'll net deck it, but like he's not playing, you know, the Starvos or the Prisms or the Viscerais or anything. So I versed Starvo for the first time on the weekend because we had a Classic Constructed event. And I don't know if the person I was versing just played it wrong. You know, he's a pretty good player. He said that he built it a little bit different to the normal Starvo decks.
Mm-hmm.
But I crushed him with Viscerai. I ended the game with 30 life.
Holy smokes.
It was such a flogging. Like, he did say he got some bad hands, and I did get some pretty fire hands. But yeah, I crushed him so hard. I was like, is this really Starvo? But I'm sure if I versed like an actual top tier Starvo, it'd be worse. But just from seeing play rates and win percentages, I've seen other people say the same thing. I think this is a fairly healthy meta. There's a good variety of heroes. You know, it's not 90% chain and like 10% prism like it was at Vegas? I think like the top tables, it was like 6 chains, a prism, and a dash. You know.
Yeah.
There's a good variety. I feel like any hero can really break through and really make a splash. But obviously, you know, there are Starvo and Prism and Viscerai now, and I think Chain is still around and kicking. Yeah, I don't think he's nearly as much as a problem as a lot of people say. But I don't have the full experience of versing him, so, you know, I can't say too much. You know, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But I still think it's anyone's game. I just think people are gravitating towards Starvo just because he has such a large card pool. He has a very good ability. He's just very straightforward to play, and you know, whenever a new hero comes out, if it seems semi good, people just jump on it. You know, that's what people did with Chain. It's what people did with Briar. You know, Starvo now. So
yeah. I agree.
If he gets Living Legend, I won't be surprised. But you know, I don't think he needs to get Living Legend. But
no. I mean, it's hard to say. I know that they just announced 2 more Battle Hardens in Europe, in Madrid, and I think it was Frankfurt.
Yes.
So which is gonna, if he wins those, he'll pad his numbers into the Pro Tour even more. Which the Pro Tour, I believe, will have a Pro Tour calling and Battle Harden. So chances are we're gonna see Living. He's like already at like 800 something points.
Wait, is he?
After this weekend, because he won both the calling and the Battle Harden, I think that's like another 150 points.
Jeez. I actually need to look at this now.
Yeah, so he's like, you know, I know what you're saying in terms of like, it is kind of a healthy meta, but Starvo's conversion rate, and especially in the right hands, is
oh my god, I'm looking at him right now. He's 814 points. He needs 1,000.
Yeah. So,
and he's been out for
3 months, 2 months. Yeah. I mean, it's like I mean, the ProQuest season really kind of accelerated that because there was a ton for 4 weeks. But like,
yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. Whatever. If he gets Living Legend, he gets Living Legend. That's like, all right, well, you clean our hands and move on. People can still play original Bravo, or they can move back over to Oldham, because it's not like there's any specific cards to his deck that are gonna, you know, really destroy anybody's chances to play those decks.
And just another thing as well, I do believe with Living Legend, even if they hit 1,000 points, they're still legal until the next set comes out. So why they're doing that is so if it's a class that only has one hero, like Prism, they can just quickly be like, oh yeah, we'll chuck this hero into this set to replace it, so that way, you know, Illusionist doesn't have no hero. So
yeah. So I think most likely we will see the Living Legend effect happen to Starvo, unless they do something on the April announcement in 2 weeks. The ban restricted. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, maybe they just let him run rampant, which is fine by me. But yeah, I mean, if it means him getting Living Legends, I'm rooting for Starvo to win the Pro Tour. But otherwise, I'm rooting for Leviah, 100%. And
Mhm.
I believe Manstant is qualified for the Pro Tour. So I'd be pretty
He's a good
disappointed.
player.
He's a great player, and I would love to see him run it, run some Leviah in the Pro Tour. I know I'll be bringing Leviah to the calling 100%,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
get some spice going. Um, before we go, you know, how is your take on the future of the game from the creator side of things? Um, do you find the game to be a really healthy and I guess positive point right now?
Yeah, I think it's at a pretty good point. Obviously, during Monarch and Tails, a lot of people were doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
Certain decks running rampant on the meta, and a lot of the investors on that side of it, the card prices were going down for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the game's as healthy as it's ever been. Um, I think the vast majority of people who play Flesh and Blood are just regular people,
Yeah.
just casuals. So I think where they're at the moment is pretty good. Obviously, there's some things that they want to change with First Edition and Unlimited, which I think is good.
Yep.
And they're coming out with more products that aren't just boosters and blitz decks. Classic battles is amazing. I think it's a bit high priced for what it is, but depends what exactly is in it. It might be
Mm-hmm.
worth that. But $50 is quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but I think LSS, they're a small company, and they've gotten this massive success, this big boom. But I think they're handling it extremely well, very professionally, and I think people just have to cut them a little bit of slack because they are small.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're going to address issues. They've got their finger on the pulse of the community. They listen to people. Obviously, it gets harder the more people there are, but you know, they watch our YouTube videos and listen to our podcasts and talk to us in person, the creators and the pros and just normal people in general. So everything we complain about, they hear it. They're not
Mm-hmm.
deaf to it. They are addressing it, but they have a a set plan for the game, and I think we just have to trust in the process for the most part. If after a couple years certain issues aren't addressed, then maybe start getting worried. But I mean, most of the issues people have, the issues disappear in a couple months. People are like, "Oh, Briar's running rampant."
Yeah.
Nobody talks about Briar anymore.
No, no, definitely not. And come the next set, we probably won't be talking about Starvo anymore.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
uh, and also, one note to say, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but I believe, um, the finals of the Calling Indianapolis had 2.2K viewers, which
Oh,
is
really?
pretty huge, honestly.
That, that's good.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I think, obviously just one data point in a sea of tons of data points, but something to kind of hold on to. But Kale, this has been just like such an awesome conversation. I just love being able to kind of get into the weeds like this, and I'm glad
Yeah,
you
yeah.
came on. Could you please plug all of your things that you want to plug? I know you just started a Discord, which I believe I joined.
Yes, you have joined. So yeah, obviously, YouTube, DeadSummer Art. I make lore content, very artsy type lore content. So lots of animating of the artwork, lots of narration, voiceovers, sound effects, music, the whole jazz. I'm also on Twitter, DeadSummer Art. Um, I've got a Discord now, for a new sort of, I guess, brand or collective, I like to call it. It's called Eternal Oracles. It's dedicated to the lore and creative side of Flesh and Blood. So if you love fan art, fan fiction, cosplays, just talking about the lore, feel free to jump into that. All of my links are on my Twitter bio. I think I have a link tree on there at the moment, same as my YouTube. I do also have a TikTok account, which I've only uploaded 2 things to, and I haven't uploaded to it in probably about 9 months to a year. But I'll be putting some stuff up there eventually, and yeah, obviously keep your eyes out for a new video that I have coming out hopefully soon, featuring Tommy, of course. It will
Can't
be
wait.
the battle for Wraith, which will be discussing the invasion of Wraith by the Old Ones, and sort of the forces of Wraith that came together to try stop it, including Old Him. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm trying my best to get content out as fast as possible, but life gets in the way and motivation is a bitch sometimes. So.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we're gonna get all the people on you to at least release the one that I'm in.
Oh yeah.
But no, I'm very excited.
Planning to get that out soon.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the final, um, product of that. The script that you did send me, which was awesome. So I am very excited to see what it all pans out to be. But my plugs for all the people out there, Twitter still at FreshBudsPod. You can email the show freshbudspod@gmail.com. You can listen to it on all platforms. You can like, subscribe, all that stuff on YouTube. And join the Discord, the Buds. It's a good group of folks in there. We have a lot of fun. We play games. We post pictures of food, and Capolo just roasts me all the time. So it's
a good Discord. I've been lurking in there, and it's good. I like it.
Yeah, it's fun in there, and I always like to close out the show talking a little bit about food. So Kale, I'd like you to share with me. Just some food that you really like, or even like a local dish or anything.
Well, I'm technically Italian in blood to an extent, so I love my pasta.
Okay. Who doesn't?
I absolutely love lasagna. One of my all-time favorite dishes is my mum's homemade lasagna with chips, or as Americans would call them, fries, although, they're more thicker cut.
Okay. Like a steak fry. That's what we call it.
Yeah, a steak fry is what you guys would call them, but we just call them chips. Yeah, Australian thing. Yeah, I love all the usual Australian stuff. I'm a big fan of chili con carne. I've got my own sort of cheap and easy recipe that I love to make whenever I'm broke. So that's always good. Yeah, and I've mostly got a bit of a sweet tooth. I love like chocolate candy, but I can't eat it nearly as much as I used to. It just wreaks havoc on my body. So
yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, I'm just a fan of everything that's not good for you.
I feel you. So. As you've probably seen in the food pics thread in my Discord, I'm usually posting stuff that I probably shouldn't be eating, but some lasagna. I've never heard of lasagna with French fries.
It's good. It's good.
I mean, I don't doubt it. I mean, it's like two really amazing things. Like, I can't imagine they're like. I mean, you just have the fries on the side, or just
Yeah, just on the side. I mean, when you cut up your lasagna, you stab a couple chips on your fork, and dunk it into the lasagna. It's heaven. Bit of salt on top.
Dang. All right. Well, I already ate tonight, but now I'm like hungry for some more food. But Kale, I really appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun, and
thanks for having me.
I know everybody's really gonna enjoy it. Everybody, please check out all of Kale's stuff, and I will see you all next week.